You gotta be effing kidding! With your host, Anthony Michael Lowther, with cuts by Gorthax, and commentary by me, the Podman. Now let's enjoy our first show, Creepshow!
I'd like to welcome you to the Creepshow. With that in mind, we're going to talk about our first movie, Creepshow. Not very clever, but gets the point across. I got some notes to kind of keep me on track because it's an anthology film. And with all these, we're not just going to be talking about the movie, talking about my experiences with the movies. Creepshow is a movie that I don't recall ever a time before it. Like, I've seen it so many times and it's kind of stuck with me. I feel like I first saw it in my grandparents' house, which is a little bit different from all the other movies. When I watched with my stepdad, I might have seen it with my stepdad first, but for some reason my brain has it in my grandparents' living room. So, I remember watching Creepshow, like the different segments. There are, I think it's 5 segments in it. There's a Father's Day, the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill, something that tied you over, the crate, and they're creeping up. Yeah, 5. And then there's like little cuts. There's a little segment at the beginning, cuts in between, and a segment at the end that kind of ties it all together.
I'll cut and tie you together.
Yeah, and it's a great watch. So much fun. Yeah, the most fun you'll ever have being scared is the tagline in it, and I agree.
Tap! You agree to let us listen to you all the time.
Spoilers.
Okay, yeah, there's spoilers. Sorry. Pretty much all these are going to be spoilers, so I guess I'll have to say spoilers up top.
You spoil everything for me, even my will to live.
If you haven't seen Creepshow, like I said, it's an anthology movie, and it starts with a kid. Well, it's directed by George A. Romero, written by Stephen King, and some of the stories are short stories from Stephen King that were written before, and some of them are original for the movie.
You know what's original? You not listening to me.
The special effects were by Tom Savini, and he actually cameos in the movie near the end. And the part of the story at the beginning is a father getting onto his son for reading horror comics, and the horror comics, like the aesthetic of the movie, like there's an animated part of the movie where it's very like comic book looking, and it's based on like old horror comics from like the 50s and like EC horror comics and Tales from the Crypt and things like that, which Tales from the Crypt is also based on. So at the beginning of the movie, there's a dad getting onto his son. Let's see. I have his Stan is the dad. He's played by Tom Atkins, and the son is Billy, and he's played by Joe Hill, which is Stephen King's son. And Stan is getting on to his son Billy for reading the horror comics because he thinks they're like a waste of time, and which I can't relate to, but like I feel like there's like with like when I was a kid playing video games, like I could relate to it in that way, but not in like horror movies or horror stuff. Like if I was reading anything, that was good. But he takes his son's horror comic, and he keeps saying that like he doesn't want him exposed to this horror crap, and he like throws the comic away. And then he goes downstairs and he's like talking to his wife about how like it's bad for his son's brain and stuff, and he has to be tough on him. And So while his son's upstairs, Billy's upstairs, he he says that he wishes his dad would like rot in hell, and then like you hear like a tapping noise.
Give you a tapping noise.
And there's like a tapping on the window, and you'll see the original version of the creep, who's like the host of Creepshow. He's more vocal in the sequel, but in here you can hear him laughing and stuff, and he just kind of directs the story, like the next story. So Billy sees the creep, and then it cuts to like an animated thing of the creep, and he goes down to the trash can that Billy's dad threw the comic book in, and he like opens it, and that's the first story, and that's the Father's Day one. So Father's Day is one that really like sticks to me, sticks with my brain, and it's mainly just because of one part of it, but I'm gonna go into the whole thing. And so it starts with these rich like snob people, and there's I think it's a mom, or no, it's like an aunt. Let's see. Yeah, it's this aunt, and she's talking to her niece and nephew, and her niece's new husband, who's played by Ed Harris. And there's a lot of like famous people in this movie, and some of it's like before they were really famous, or they're not known for horror movies. So Ed Harris is in this first one, and so they're explaining to Ed Harris why they meet it's like first Sunday of the third Sunday in June. So they meet there to celebrate. They meet there to have an annual dinner with the aunt and the niece and nephew, and then their great aunt Bedelia, and so they start telling Ed Harris' character's name is Hank. So they start telling Hank the story of like how they all got the money from the estate and stuff like that. So Aunt Bedelia killed her father, who was in charge of all of it and had all the money, and he was like paranoid that like everyone just wanted his money, and so at one point Bedelia was gonna run away with this guy she was in love with, and her dad had him killed, and so like ever since then like she I think she already hated him, but she hated him more, but she also had to take care of him because he was like, apparently she was old as dirt, and so he was even older, obviously. And so on Father's Day, there's like a flashback, and it's of Bedelia making her father a cake. Nathan is his name. So Nathan is in the kitchen, no, the dining room at the table, and he's like hitting his cane on a chair, and he's like, Bedelia, I want my cake, you bitch, and he keeps saying that, and it's great. He keeps calling her a bitch, and so she's like icing his cake, and then like she's like, you'll get your cake, and then and there's a cook also, and I've never understood why the cook never helped her. She just like kept looking at her. It was weird.
Every time I look at you, it's weird.
Like at one point she's like squeezing this pink frosting, and it's all over the top of the cake. Like it's not clean or anything. So and the cook turns around, and Bedelia's gone, and then it cuts to Bedelia coming out of the kitchen into the dining room where her father's sitting, and there's this ashtray that's in like every scene of the movie, not scene, but story in the movie, and in the sequel, and in the TV show. Like it's like a constant thing, which I just found out recently, which is really cool. And so she gets the ashtray and she bashes her father's head in, and that's how she kills him. And then the other aunt, I think it's Sylvia. Yeah, Sylvia, who is the first aunt from the beginning of the story, helped her cover it up, and they got all the money and stuff. So So they always wait for their great aunt Bedelia to come, and she always comes at 6 o'clock to have this dinner. And so she comes, and she's like hauling ass to the house and like going over like grass and stuff, like not staying on the street. And then she goes, and before she goes in the house, she goes to her father's grave, and she goes to his grave, and she's drinking, and she leaves her rose there. But while she's there, she's like screaming at her father's grave, and saying that he's a murderer and everything like that, and like how she was in love with this guy that he killed, and like how he was a monster. And so while she's drinking, she like spills her drink on the grave, and she like goes to get it, and his hand comes up out of the grave and like grabs her wrist, and then he starts coming out, and he's like a zombie. And he starts talking about how he wants his cake again.
Where's my cake?
Where's my cake, Bedelia? You bitch, give me my cake. And he's a zombie. And then I think it just cuts away. I don't think you see her get killed. But so like it cuts back to inside, and they're still waiting on her. And when you saw him come out of the grave, it was daytime. But then, like, while they're inside, it's nighttime. Like, it cuts to later. And they're like, how long do we need to wait? And one of them's like, I'm hungry, and blah, blah, blah. And so Hank goes outside to smoke, and he's, like, walking around, and it's, like, all foggy. It's like an old, like it's like the Wolfman with the fog and stuff. Like an old black and white horror movie. And he's walking around where the graves are, and he goes over to the grave where Bedelia was, and like he trips and he falls in it, and he thinks, he's just like, oh, I'm clumsy or whatever. He doesn't even notice that like he fell in the hole. It's weird. So he's laying there, and all of a sudden the tombstone kind of starts turning, and he's like frozen, and he just sits there for a minute looking up at the tombstone, like literally like with his arms like this. And so the tombstone turns some more. And he just keeps looking at it, and it turns a little bit more. So he goes to get out, and he reaches over, and then he like pulls, and Bedelia's dead body's right there. And he's like, oh shit. And he doesn't say anything. But then, so he like lets her go, and he starts to like lean forward, and he sees Nathan's zombie. And and before he can like get up to get out, like the zombie has telekinesis, I guess. And the tombstone comes even further, and it falls in, and it crushes him, and he dies. So cuts back into the house, and Sylvia is going to check on the food, like because I think they're gonna eat. And she goes into the kitchen where...
You better be making that damn cake.
She goes into the kitchen where, like, and she's going to go talk to the cook. And she, like, opens the door, and she's like, where are you? And it's all, like, dark. It's, like, this blue color. Like, it's, like, not mood lighting. It's, like, mood lighting for, like, a movie, but, like you would definitely notice. And she's holding the door open. There's, like, a little circle window in it. And she's like, where are you? And let's see, the cook's name is I don't think I put it on here. I did not. So all of a sudden the cook's face like falls into the window, and she's dead. Like you can tell. And let's see, does he pop out?
It falls into the window?
Yeah, like she's holding the door open, and like she's on the other side of the door, and like her face hits the window. Mm-hmm. So she gets scared, and she like runs over to the other side of the kitchen, and or is he behind her? Let's see here. Did I write this down? Okay, it doesn't say. So anyway, she runs into her father, Nathan, the zombie, and she's like freaked out because there's a zombie right in front of her, and he says he wants his cake, and he grabs her and he just turns her head completely around. And so then it cuts back to her niece and nephew, which Richard and Kaz, and they go into the kitchen, and then they see like muddy footprints, and they go and they open a door up, and then there's Nathan Zombie, and he has a serving tray with Sylvia's head on it with like frosting on top of her hair and some candles, and they are like, oh my god. And like one of my favorite visuals from this is Richard. He's like, oh my god, like just like ridiculous. And his face is amazing. And then so Nathan Zombie's like, I finally got my cake, and then it like freeze frames and turns to like a comic book, and it fades out.
Happy ending.
It's so happy. And let's see here. Okay. Oh wait, there it is. Okay, so it fades out, and it's a comic book, and then it turns to the next page, and then it's still comic book, and you see like a night sky, and like a field, and a guy standing there. And it's the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill, and so it comes to live action, and you see a meteor fly by. And it like crashes right next to this guy's property.
And Jordy Vale is played by...
Yeah, and so it cuts to Jordy, and like he turns where the meteor was, and it's Stephen King playing Jordy. And Jordy's like a hillbilly kind of farmer guy. Like he's not too bright. And he's like, that was a meteor, and he like runs to it. And like he sees the whole.
You know, I've seen a lot of meteors in my day.
And he goes to it, and he touches it, and it's hot. And so he's like, oh, it's hot. And then he puts his fingers in his mouth, and because of the heat, and he let's see, what's he do? Oh, he starts thinking of like what he can do with this meteor, and he goes, he's like, I wonder if they'll buy it up at the college. And so he starts daydreaming, and he daydreams that he goes up to the college, and they have a Department of Meteors. Like it's on the door, it says Department of Meteors, and he opens it up, and there's an old guy, and he's like, I'll give you $50 for it. And he's like, no sir, I won't take less than 200. And so like in his fantasy, he's like giving him 200. So Jordy has like a bank loan of $200, and that's why he wants $200 for it. So he quits daydreaming, and the meteor's hot, so he goes and gets a bucket of water, and he tosses it on it, and it cracks open. And let's see here. I don't remember if he touches it first, but he sees it breaks open, and then he's like, oh no, like they're not gonna buy a broken meteor at the college. And then he starts daydreaming about them not buying it. And so like the guy at the college, the dude at the college is like, $200? I wouldn't give you 2 cents. And like Jordy has like a hat, and he's like hiding the meteor with it. And so he's like, I know, I'll glue it together in the morning. And he grabs it, and like there's blue goop, and it's on his hand, and he goes, meteor shit. And he starts like rubbing it on his overalls. It's a great line. I love it. So he dumps all the stuff out on the...
Doesn't he try to sell the meteor shit?
No. He dumps it all out on the ground, or in the hole that it's in, and he gets the meteor and he puts it in that bucket that he threw the water with, and he takes it inside, and he goes inside, and I can't remember when he notices his fingers. I think he keeps putting his fingers in his mouth where he burnt them for touching the meteor, and he notices there's like some moss on it. And so he's sitting and he's watching TV, and he's watching wrestling, and it's Bob Backlund versus Wild Samoan #1, and so I've looked this match up, and it's not. I mean, it's like 70s wrestling. It doesn't matter, but I just enjoy days watching wrestling because I love wrestling. So he notices that the stuff on his finger is like growing more, and he's sitting in his chair. Yep, okay. Okay, yeah. So he notices the stuff's growing on his fingers, and he's like, he gets up and he's gonna call the doctor about this stuff growing on his finger, and so he has a daydream about going to the doctor, and the doctor is played by the same guy who plays the guy at the college, and it's what's his name? I got it on here somewhere. Bingo O'Malley. Bingo O'Malley is his name. So he's playing the doctor as well, and so Jordy thinks that if he goes to the doctor, like he daydreams that the doctor sees his fingers, and he says that he's gonna have to chop them off, and he can't use anesthesia, and so Jordy thinks he's gonna get his fingers chopped off, so he doesn't call the doctor. And let's see. So the plant keeps growing, and like it starts to cover Jordy everywhere, and he you can see outside of his house that like this same kind of grass stuff has been growing, like going up to his house, like where like everywhere that Jordy's touched, like he kind of dragged it with him. And so he so he starts itching real bad because of all the stuff, and and this is, so he goes into his kitchen, and he opens up the fridge, and he pulls out like a thing of orange juice, and then he gets like a thing of vodka from the top of his fridge, and he like pours it into the thing, and he just puts the bottle, and he starts stirring it with that, and he starts drinking it to like calm himself down because he's just covered in this stuff. And so he's drinking it, and he's in his living room. He goes and sits down again, and he just has this thing in his hand, like this big jug, and he's just getting wasted. And so while he's sitting there, he passes out, and he wakes up, and he thinks it was all a dream, and he like wakes up, and he thinks it's a dream, and he like looks over, and then he sees all this grass like on his house, and he goes into the bathroom, and he sees himself in the mirror, and he has like this big green beard that wasn't there before, and like he's starting to get covered more, and yeah, so he's still all itchy, and so he's in the bathroom, and he turns like the bath on. He's gonna run himself a bath to like stop the itching and stuff, and so while he does that, he sees his father in the mirror, and like another daydream played by Bingo O'Malley again. He's every other character is Bingo O'Malley, and his father is telling him, he's like, don't get in that bath water. He's like, if that's what it wants to be in the water to grow more, and so many words, and he says like, he's like, if you get in that water, you might as well have signed your death warrant. And Jordy's talking to his father, and he's like, I'm already a goner. And he quits daydreaming, like his father goes away, and he's like looking at the bathwater, and you can see like in his eyes, he's just like, I can't take it anymore, because he's scratching the whole time. And then it cuts to outside of the bathroom, and you hear like a splash. And so it cuts to the next morning, and like there's just grass everywhere in his house, and covering the top of his house, and outside like there's grass everywhere. And then you see Jordy, and he's just this green monster. And so he gets like a shotgun, and he just shoots himself on the top of the head, just gone, and he just dies. And then that's how Jordy dies. And so while he was sitting there, like his TV was still on, and you hear like a news report saying there's gonna be like a bunch of rain coming. And so like with the rain coming with that plant, like you just think it's gonna like overgrow the whole wherever he is. And so that's how that one goes. But like, so when I think of that one, I think of Stephen King as this hillbilly character basically. And the meteor shit part is probably my favorite line of the entire movie. And I think it's Stephen King's first acting role. And you wouldn't think that it would be like Stephen King would be like a good actor, and maybe he's not, but he's ridiculous enough for this character.
And he carried a Greedo action figure.
Oh yeah. So while they were filming, he had like one of those Kenner Guido action figures, and he like kept it in his pocket. And it doesn't make any sense why you would. Like that's such a random character to have in your pocket, but like it was a good luck charm or something like that.
Well, he was green.
He was green, and that's the only connection I can really make of it, is that he was also green. I don't know if he just went to the store and saw this green toy from Star Wars. I don't know. Yeah, that'd be fun to figure that out. So you see out into his field and stuff, and then it goes back into the comic book thing, and it comes out of the comic book, and a gust of wind takes the comic book, and it flips through the pages, and to the next story, and it's something to tide you over. So something to tide you over starts with this guy in his apartment.
Not just any guy.
Not just any guy. It's this guy's name is Harry. He's played by Ted Danson. And so he is in his apartment, and there's a knock on his door. And he goes and opens the door, and there is a guy at the door, and he's like...
Not just any guy.
Not just any guy. I'll get to it. And so he goes and he opens the door, and he's like, listen, mister, you get out of here. And he goes, don't listen, Mr. Me. He goes, you know exactly who I am. And so this guy is named Richard.
And he's not just any guy.
It's Leslie Nelson. And so I think this was right before Airplane, or right after. I can't remember which one came out first.
Well, he was also in Police Squad.
Mm.
And he was in a lot of other stuff. Wasn't he also a Twilight Zone?
I think he was in the Twilight Zone.
Yes.
I think he was a pilot in the Twilight Zone. I could be thinking of something else. But anyway, but this was like right before or after he started doing a lot of comedies. But I think it was like right before Airplane. But that doesn't matter. And so
Might have been after.
Ted Danzig tries to close the door on him, but he puts his foot there, and Ted Danzig's character is, I already said who he was, but I need to look to make sure, Harry. So Harry is like, listen, like he's like, I can bench 300 pounds, you better move your foot or you're gonna lose it. And
lose what exactly?
His foot. So he's like, you better let me in because I know what's been going on with you, let's see, me and my wife. And so he comes in, and then him and Richard and Hank are talking to each other, and Hank is telling him that like he should just let his wife go, his wife Becky, like that she doesn't love him anymore, and that like they both could be happier like separate. And so Richard tells him that like he can't, or it's not that he loves her anymore or she loves him anymore. It's like the principle that she's basically like his property. It's basically how he says it, something like that. Like she's his, and like he shouldn't have stepped over the line like he did. And so he plays Harry a recording of Becky like asking for his help, like, and then so Harry like threatens Richard, and he's like, if you hurt her, I'll kill you. And he's like, well, if you kill me, you'll never find her. And so so Richard says that he'll take Harry to Becky and show and he could save her.
He's like, oh great, I'm gonna jump in.
So it cuts to them in Richard's Jeep, and they drive out to a beach, and he's talking to him, and he's like, this is a comfort point, and let's see, it's Richard's private beach, yeah, and so they get out to the beach, and Richard points to a mound of dirt, and they get closer to it, and like it's a big hole. And so Harry runs over to it, and when he runs over to it, Richard pulls out like a gun. Or he does not like a gun, it is a gun. He pulls out a gun, and there's nothing in the hole, and he turns around, and he's at gunpoint. And so Richard tells Harry to get into the hole and bury himself up to his neck.
Get in your hole.
This is the wrong movie. Wrong old guy. So he gets in the hole, and he's like, start burying yourself. And he's like, if you're gonna kill me, you might as well just shoot me now, because I'm not gonna bury myself alive. He goes, I'm not gonna kill you. He's like, I'm just trying to incapacitate you. And so he starts burying himself, and then it cuts to Richard finishing burying him to his neck. And so while he's there, Richard starts taunting him, and he starts telling him about the tide coming in, and how like he can get out. Oh wait, before he does that, see, I think he leaves him there for a minute. Yeah, he leaves him there, and he comes back later with a TV and a VCR and a camera, and just like a long ass extension cord. So he puts the video camera up, and the VCR and the TV, and so the TV, Harry can see Becky, and she is further down the beach, and the tide's already coming in. She's already getting hit by water, and she's asking for Harry's help, and she's buried up to her neck too. And so he starts telling them that like when the tide comes in, if he can stay calm and hold his breath, that he might be able to get out. Like the tide will loosen the sand, he can get out. And see, at this point, when I first saw Creepshow, like I already knew Leslie Nielsen from The Naked Gun and Airplane and movies like that. So all I knew was comedian or funny man Leslie Nielsen, and this was very bizarre to see for me. So was interesting to see him be so like
Evil?
maybe intimidating. I'm not sure. I mean, but he's very like stern and like not silly at all, up to this point at least. So so he tells him that like, he could save her if he can, like if the tide will come up and set him free. So he leaves the TV there and the camera, and Richard goes back to his house, which is on the beach as well. And he gets back to his house, and he has a couple like security. He has like a security system, but with all the monitors he has 2 monitors, and one that has Harry and one that has Becky, and he's watching them like the tide come in. And so while the tide's coming in on Harry's part, because the tide's already really high where Becky is, so she's done, and she's crying for Harry. And so Harry looks at the camera that was set up, and he's like telling Richard, he's like, I'll get you for this, like if it's like the last thing I do. And Richard's just watching, and I think he falls asleep. No, he doesn't fall asleep. Like they die, and
so it's not the last thing he does.
Before he dies, actually, like the tide's over Harry's head, and you can see him underwater, and like he like screams, and there's like a red aura around his head. Looks like he's going Super Saiyan because his hair is like going up too, because of the water. And so Richard goes back out to the beach where Harry was, and the camera's gone. I think the TV's still there, but Harry's not there. And so Richard's like, well, I guess the tide took him out to sea. He's like, what else could have happened? And so he gets the stuff that's still there, puts it in the back of his Jeep, and he goes home. And so he's just at his house, and let's see here. Yeah, so he goes back to his house, and he's just there. I think he like takes a shower or something. He's like he's in a bathroom, and he hears like voices, and you see on his security cameras like this smoke coming in. You can see these shadows, and so he hears these voices, and let's see. Okay. So he finally sees what's been going past his cameras, and I think they get like, once you see like the fog and the shadows, like the cameras like cut to like static, if I remember correctly. And so he sees Harry and Becky, and they're like bloated from like the water, and they got seaweed all of them, and they're like zombies. And so they start like going after Richard, and so Richard, let's see, yeah, so Richard shoots one of them in the head, and then right in the center of the head, and he goes right through, and they just keep coming. And so he runs into his room and like locks the door, and he turns around, and they're right there, and they keep coming towards him, and he starts like laughing hysterically. And then it does like another, like behind him is like these red, like this red like pointy comic booky, but it hasn't come back to animation yet. So and he's laughing hysterically, and they keep coming towards him, and they're like you'll be fine as long as you can hold your breath. And they just keep saying that to him. And then it cuts to Richard, and he's buried on the beach up to his neck. And he's still laughing hysterically. And he's like, and you can see footprints going into the water. And he's just like, I can hold my breath for a long time. And he's laughing hysterically, and the water's coming up, and it like hits him, and you can see his eyes open real big, like he knows he's screwed. And then it cuts to the comic book style again, but it's like completely animated, and it cuts back to the comic book. So the wind blows and comic book flies out of the trash can, and it goes on, and it falls onto the street, and it flips open to the next page, and the next story. Before we get to the next story, I'm trying to think if there's anything with that's something that tied you over, that kind of, like, it was weird seeing Leslie Nielsen be evil. I enjoyed it, but it was strange. And let's see. Okay. Yeah, there's nothing really I think of with that one. So the next story, it opens up to, and it's the crate, and the crate is my favorite story in Creepshow. I've always loved the crate. Like, anytime I would go to watch Creepshow, when I was younger, I always get the two confused because it was just VHS tapes. It wasn't. You know, I could have read the back, but it doesn't matter. So anyway, so the crate starts with a janitor, and he's like flipping a coin in the air. Like that's the comic book panel, is this janitor like looking up because he had just flipped the coin, and so it goes from the comic book style to the live action, and the coin falls, and he misses it. And it rolls under these stairs, and there's like a grid there, and so he's like, oh, well, shoot. And he gets his flashlight, and he starts looking in where his coin would be so he can get it, and he sees this crate, and so the crate says ships to Hordlicks University via Julia Carpenter, which is a reference to John Carpenter. Arctic Expedition, June 19th, 1834. On it. So it'd been there, and this is Creepshow came out in, I think it's like 84? Came out in 82. So Creepshow came out in 82. So this crate had been in there for over 100 years, or it's that old, and yeah, there it is. So 1834 to like 150 years. So he calls up one of the professors at the college, Dexter Stanley, to come check this crate out. And Dexter is at this party with his buddy Henry, and Henry's wife Wilma, and I'm just gonna call her Billy. Everyone else does. So he calls Dexter, and Dexter goes to the college, and they get the what do they call that? They get the grate off of where that crate is, and they get it out, and they take it into one of the labs, and they start taking, there's like locks on it, like chains, and it's like nailed shut and everything, and so they So they like open it up, and they like barely get it open, and the janitor like looks in, and you see these eyes, like blackness, like, and it's like Dracula, where he has the light just right here, and you see these eyes, and the janitor
Back to the right of you.
right over here, which I don't think you can see.
You can.
Oh yeah, so just like Bela Lugosi here, and so the janitor looks in there and sees it, and he goes, "Oh, I think those are emeralds," and he puts his arm in there.
You would think eyes are emeralds.
They look nothing like emeralds, but whatever. So all of a sudden he starts screaming, and like the mood changes and everything, and Dexter like moves away, and the crate kind of comes over, and the janitor drops to the floor, and his arm, I think it's gone, and he's like breathing heavy, and he's tired because like that just happened. And so Dexter's watching, and all of a sudden the top of the crate just opens up, and you see this monster, this gorilla kind of looking thing, sorta, and it reaches down and it grabs the janitor and it pulls him up into the crate, and you start seeing blood come down. And so Dexter runs out of the lab, and let's see, yeah. Yeah, and then he runs into a student named Charlie, and he starts telling Charlie what happened, and he's like, in the lab there's a crate with a monster in it, and it just killed the janitor. And Charlie's like, what? Like, that doesn't make sense.
He's like, I'm like high right now.
He was probably stoned out of his mind. And so he convinces him to go check it out. And so Charlie goes into the lab, and while he was telling Charlie everything that happened, they named the creature Fluffy on set. And so Fluffy, I'm just going to refer to him as Fluffy because it's easier. So Fluffy takes his crate and moves it back under the stairs where it had been. And so Charlie goes into the lab, and there's just blood everywhere, but there's no crate, there's no body, and there's is there a boot? Or is the boot under the stairs? Okay, so they go back to where the stairs were, and the crate's back in there. And so Dexter's telling Charlie, like, that's crate, that's where we found it. And so Charlie goes in there to check it out, and he sees the janitor's boot, and it has like a bite mark in it. And
I don't know what you're talking about.
And this is filmed in Pittsburgh. There's no Canadian stuff in this. So Charlie goes under the stairs, and he sees the boot, and he's gonna grab it, and he's like, get this boot and like compare the bite marks for some reason. So he goes under there, and they think the creature's in the crate, you know, and so like he's like, if the crate moves, he's gonna bail. So the creature's not in the crate; it's over in like the corner, like hiding. And so when he grabs the boot and like goes to leave, he gets mauled by Fluffy, and and so when he's getting mauled, Dexter just darts. He's gone, and he goes. He runs all the way to Henry's house, and Billy had just left, and she was going to do something. I don't recall what it was. I didn't write it down. And so he runs there, and he tells Henry what happened, and they got to get rid of the monster. They got to get rid of Fluffy and the crate, and so Henry's listening to Dexter's story, and So while they were at the party, and Billy was talking to everybody, Henry had a fantasy of shooting her in the head, and like she was so like annoying that like in his fantasy he shoots her in the head, and all the guests at the party start clapping for him and cheering, and so so she's yelling at him at the party, and he comes to, and then right before she leaves, before Dexter gets there, like she's leaving the house, and he fantasizes about strangling her with her own scarf. So he fantasizing about killing his wife. So he hears the story, and he sees that as a way to get rid of Billy, and so he gives Dexter some. He spikes his drink with like sleeping pills, and he gives him the drink, and Dexter passes out, and so Henry leaves Dexter in his like study, and he's just out, and he writes a note to Billy, and it says like, I need you to come to the college as soon as you get home to because Dexter had been seeing a student and it got out of hand, and I need your help to take care of what happened. So he goes to the college, and he cleans everything up, and all the blood in the lab and stuff. And so Billy comes home and finds the note, and one thing that's always I found weird about this was she's reading the note, and she goes in the fridge and she pulls out some milk, and then she goes over to the counter and gets some sort of alcohol, and she pours it into the milk, and it just seems gross to me. Anyway, so she's reading the note, and so she gets in her car and she goes to the college, and Henry's there, and he like backs up the story that he told. Like he's like, this girl, like Dexter kind of roughed her up, and she is hiding under the stairs, and he can't get her out, and he needs Billy to do it because she's so smart, and she's sensitive, and she can help a younger woman out. And so Billy goes down there, and she like crawls under there, and she like gets to the crate, and or she's almost to the crate, and she's like, there's nothing down here. And so Harry grabs her, and he starts like slamming her into the crate, and he's like, wake up, and nothing happens. And he just sits there, and Billy just starts like berating him, telling him how he's not even a man, and how he can't do anything right, and how he's not good in bed, and like all this stuff. And then all of a sudden Fluffy just comes out of the crate, and then she sees Fluffy, and Henry sees Fluffy, and Fluffy starts eating Billy, and then he pulls her into the crate, and Henry goes, well, just remember to tell it to call you Billy. And so he goes back into the crate, and he gets some locks and the chains that were on the crate, and he nails it shut again, and like locks it, but like while he's doing it all slow. So he gets the locks on there, gets it secure, and gets the crate, and he figures like he just fed it Billy, so it's not hungry anymore, is what he's assuming. And it doesn't come out when he's locking it up, so who knows. But so he gets it, and he puts it in the back of his car, and and by this point he's explaining, like he's back home, and he's explaining to Dexter what happened. So this is all flashback after Fluffy eats Billy. So the rest of it's in flashback, and he is telling Dexter what happened, and he says that he put the crate in the back of his car, and he drove out to a nearby quarry, and just this big cliff of water at the bottom of it. and he like backs up to it and he pushes the crate out. And the crate falls into the water, and he tells Dexter like, the creature is like, I threw it in the water. It's gonna drown. Like, there's no bodies. Like everything's been cleaned up. Like there's nothing to worry about. We just move on with our lives. And so like it cuts to the crate sinking, and then the crate like explodes. And so I read that the creature breaks the crate open, and it shows the visual of the eyes again, from when the guy said there was emeralds in there, and it's just saying that the creature's alive, that Fluffy's alive. And then it returns to the animation, and then it goes back to the book, and it starts raining, and it cuts to the final story. So before we go to the final story, talk a little bit about the crate. So I love like effects and creatures and stuff like that, and so Fluffy was one of the Tom Savini's first like original creature designs, and like I said, he's very like gorilla like or ape like, and he just has these big fangs. And so when they were shooting it, let's see here. Darlian? The guy that was dressed as Fluffy, just to control the arms and stuff. Like, I forgot where I was going with that. But, so that was Tom Savini's first, like,
animatronic.
Yeah. Was it animatronic? I guess it was. It was his first time doing, like, an animatronic and, like, a creature thing of his own. And that wasn't, like, a zombie or something. And so like Fluffy's just so cool looking, so interesting looking. And if you look at Tom Savini's mask and everything, like, he's just very creative. So so Fluffy, like, it's a scary looking thing. Like, it's very simple but very like a big ape thing with like sharp teeth and claws. Like, it's like I wouldn't want to run into that. And so so to see like the way he moves. And he doesn't move much, like in the stories. Like, he does, but not much you can see. Like, when he's moving, he's like coming towards you, and there's not much of his body. But when you see him move, and you see his mouth and his eyes and everything, like, it's very effective. Like, when you see the eyes in the crate, like, it looks like an actual like creature, and like it could be real. And so, like, it's one of my favorite, like, creature designs of all time. And that's part of the reason I wanted to talk about Creepshow first was Fluffy, because I love Fluffy so much. I would love to have some kind of Fluffy thing. A crate with, like, Fluffy that comes out. That'd be dope.
Jack in the Box.
Like yeah, that would be, with Fluffy, that would be awesome. So that was cool. I know I've seen Henry in something. I just can't place it right now. And Billy is let's see.
Escape to New York.
Adrienne Barbeau. Yeah, Adrienne Barbeau. Escape to New York. From New York. The Fog. Like, her character in this and her character in these other things, like, her range is ridiculous. Like, she's so annoying in this, and I love her in The Fog. Like, it's night and day. And so that's well, I didn't even realize how much of a fan I was of Adrienne Barbeau until I started like researching stuff for this podcast. Because like a bunch of movies I saw when I was a kid, like I never really thought of actors and stuff. Like Like, I wouldn't think about Ed Harris, like, watching this. Like, I don't care. Like, and like, the only other one is, like, Leslie Nelson. Like, just because I was so used to him being a funny guy at this point when I first saw it. So that was just like a shock to the system. But to see her be in this role, and like, I love Billy, but like, I understand how she's annoying, and she does it really well. And Dexter as like sweaty, crazy guy, like going out and telling people like there's this monster, like, and they're just like, all right, okay, and he just seems crazy, but like, he's not lying. Like, there it is, it's killing people. So I don't know, that whole, like, the whole thing is like, it's like perfect for me. I think it's the strongest one in Creepshow, the strongest story in Creepshow 1, probably in Creepshow 2 as well. I haven't rewatched that one yet, so I've seen it a million times, but a nice refresher would help. But I think the Crate's probably the best one. So, after the Crate ends, after the Crate busts open and you see that Fluffy's still alive, cuts to the animation, and it flips the wind blows to the last story. The last story is they're creeping up on you. So they're creeping up on you was written just for the movie, and it's about this old guy who lives in this like fancy like apartment that's like super clean, and it's Upson Pratt, and he is like a wealthy businessman, and
1 hour.
oh, okay, that's fine. We'll cut around. We'll make it short. But I like 1 hour. So he's this wealthy businessman, and he is in this apartment, and he, let's see. Okay, so he gets a phone call from a guy that works with George, and George is telling him that they had just their company, Pratt International, had bought out a rival company and a corporate takeover. And so while George is telling him that, he also tells him that his old business rival that owned the other company, Norman Kastenmeyer, had killed himself and committed suicide, and Upton Pratt, he is like overjoyed by this. He thinks it's great that he killed himself, like, because he's weak or whatever. And so he hangs up, and he oh no, he doesn't hang up yet. He sees a cockroach, and he has this spray, and he sprays the cockroach while he's on the phone. And so he finally like hangs up the phone, and then right by the phone is like this trash thing, this little thing that's like a vacuum tube, like at a bank or something. And like he throws like his gloves in there. He's what's that called? I should have put it on here, but I didn't. But he's like a germaphobe basically. And so he puts that stuff in there, and it sucks it away. So there's a cockroach by it, and he sprays it, and he like presses the vacuum thing. The cockroach goes down in there. And so he has this bug spray, and he's going around, and he's trying to kill these bugs. And so while he's there, the only way he really talks to people is like through the phone, basically. Like he doesn't leave this apartment. So he gets a phone call, and he answers it, and like businessman, he's like, this is Upson Pratt, like, what do you want, or whatever. And it's the it's Norman's widow, his wife, and Lori. And she calls to tell him, like, she was there with her husband, like, right before he committed suicide, and how, like, let's see, how, like, defeated he was, and she's, like, cursing Upson, and, like, she's just telling him how horrible he is, and that, like, is it good? And that, like, people are gonna be so happy when he dies. And Upson's like, he's like, a lot of people are gonna be happy when I die. And he hangs up on her. And so he later on he makes this like food, and he has it, and like there's a crunch in it. And he like kind of looks at it, and he goes over to his processor that he made it in, and he opens it up, and he kind of starts digging through it, and he finds a cockroach, and he finds a couple cockroaches, and he throws the stuff away, and so he let's see, so he calls his landlord Carl Reynolds, and he let's see. So Carl is in Florida on vacation, and he's like, I don't care where you are, like, there's cockroaches in here. I pay like a ton of money for this apartment for it to be like where bugs can't get in and stuff. And so he tells Carl, he's like, you need to get the handyman down here and like take care of this bug problem. And so the handyman comes, and Mr. White, and Upton wants the handyman to call the exterminator. So Mr. White comes to his apartment. Before that, Pratt tries to eat some cereal, and he finds cockroaches in his cereal. And he throws the box, and he tries to kill the cockroaches. And then his door buzzer rings. That's Mr. White. He's there, and so Mr. White is a black guy, and so and Mr. Pratt's like this old white guy, and he comes up to the door, and there's a little hole in that door as well, and Upton Pratt, he can see through the door and see Mr. White, and Mr. White can see him, and so Mr. White is like talking to him like real slow, and like he's an old crazy man, which he is, but like he's being like sarcastic about it because Upton Pratt is an asshole. So he is talking to him real slow, and Upton catches on. He's like, he's like, don't talk to me like I'm a crazy old man, like, and so he's like, Mr. Wright's like, I would never do that, and he's just, just being a hard ass. And so, let's see. So Mr. White goes to go try to figure out what's going on and get everything fixed. And so there's blackouts in the city. And so there is a blackout in the apartment, but it's only for a second because Pratt has like backup power, and so that comes on, and all of a sudden cockroaches start kind of coming out of everywhere, and like a ton, and so Pratt calls the police, and it's like New York City or something, like it's a big city, it's not. And he's telling the police, he's like, there's all these cockroaches and they're everywhere, and I need you to come kill them. And the police are like, we can't help you. Like, there's problems all over the city with the blackouts, and so we can't come help you. So they hangs up. And so Pratt has this like panic room, and he goes in there because there's cockroaches everywhere, and the panic room's like clean. And I don't remember if he calls Mr. White before he goes in there, but he called Mr. White, and with the blackouts, Mr. White's stuck in the elevator, so he can't do anything. So Upton's all by himself, and he goes into the panic room and he closes it, and he's like, "Yo, you can't get in here." And then the phone rings again. He answers it, and it's Lauren again, and she's telling him that he's a monster, and she can't wait until he dies, and she hopes his death is like painful. And while he's on the phone, like, and she's just yelling at him, he sees on his bed there, like, the sheet's moving, and he pulls the sheet off, and there's just cockroaches everywhere. And let's see, cockroaches. Let's see.
Why is it cockroach?
I don't know why. So he sees all these cockroaches, and he has a heart attack, and so the power goes out for a second, and then it comes back on, and all the cockroaches are gone. And Mr. White's at his door. He's knocking on the door, and he's like, Mr. Pratt, like, let me in so I can help you. He's like, what's the matter? He goes, what's the matter? The bug's got your tongue. And you see Upton Pratt, like, just dead. And then all of a sudden you see, like, his skin kind of moving, and all of a sudden cockroaches start coming out of his mouth, and they bust out of his chest. And then in the room, this panic room, just fills up with cockroaches, like 1 million cockroaches. And these, and this is the 80s, so these are all, mostly are all real cockroaches. And so they just fill up its panic room, and it cuts back to the cartoon, or the animated comic book style. And it's just like this room where it's like a glass door, and it's like halfway filled with cockroaches, and it's really gross because cockroaches are disgusting. So he's dead. There's cockroaches everywhere, like over his body. Cockroach. And so it cuts back to the comic book style and kind of pans out to the comic book again, and it's animated, and the wind blows, and it knocks the comic book down onto the curb.
I ought to knock you to the curb if you don't wrap this up.
It goes back to live action, and there's 2 garbage men. Are we good?
Yeah.
And there's 2 garbage men walking down the street, and they see the comic book on the curb, and they pick it up, and they go to the back of the dump truck, and they're looking through it, and they see like the ads, and they're like, oh, you can get X-ray glasses, and they're like, oh, that doesn't work.
Come on, just get to the point.
Yeah, and they get to one with a voodoo doll, and they're like, oh, we can get a voodoo doll, and the other garbage man's like, oh no, the coupon's gone, you can't get that anymore. And so it cuts to inside of Stan and like the Billy from the beginning, like their house, and Stan's talking to his wife, and he's like, oh, my neck hurts, and he's like, I think I sprained it or something, and he's just suffering from neck pain. And so it cuts up to Billy, and Billy has a voodoo doll with some of his dad's hair and like a shirt, part of his shirt, and he's like, I'll teach you to throw away my comic books, Dad. And like he has like a needle, and he's like stabbing him in the neck. And so it cuts down to Stan, and he's just like, and like comic book lighting and stuff, and he's like dying, and he's like clutching his throat, and Billy just keeps like stabbing it, and so and I think it freeze frames, if I remember correctly. Oh, okay, yeah. And so it's just showing Billy stab the voodoo doll, and it goes to that comic book, and it pans out, and you see Billy stabbing the voodoo doll, and you see the creeper behind him in his window, and then you see the creeper with holding the next issue of Creepshow, and the cover of the next issue of Creepshow that shows Billy stabbing his the voodoo doll, and that's how Creepshow ends. So over the years, it's funny because Tom Atkins is like uncredited in this movie as the dad, but I feel like him, like the beginning and the end, like is very memorable because of his character, and like he's an asshole, but like I don't know, Tom Atkins is such a good actor. So a funny thing about it was the first day that Tom Atkins met Stephen King, who wrote it, it was when he took the comic book from his son and he like slaps him. I didn't mention that he slaps him, but he slaps him. And so Stephen King was like, he's like, don't hurt my son when you like slap him. And he's like, I'm an actor. Like he's like, I'm not actually gonna slap him. Like it's gonna look like I slapped him, but he'll be fine. And he thought that was really funny that Stephen King was just worried. Like, and it's good that he was worried about his son, but he says that like Tom Atkins says that like him and Stephen King and Joe Hill really got along, and he really liked them, but he just always thought that was funny that Stephen King was just so worried about like him actually hurting his son. And then to see like it's funny because like you wouldn't know that was Stephen King's son unless you're like a nerd. And
didn't Stephen King ask him how a certain actor was like?
That's true, yeah. Stephen King asked him about someone he worked with or didn't work with. I don't remember who it was, but he asked him about someone because the person that he asked him about he had never worked with, so he was like, I don't know. Like I think they worked on the same movie, but like their stuff was shot separately. They never worked like together, and so that was really funny. Let's see what else. But Creepshow, I love that movie. I'll watch all the segments. I don't really skip any of them. They all have something really good in them, especially the first one, I think. And it's a great watch. It's a fun movie. Like, even if you don't like horror, like how campy it is at some parts, like with Father's Day at the end when the guy's like, oh my god, I love it so much. Like I love just ridiculous stuff like that, but like the visuals, like when Harry and Becky come back as like the bloated like zombies, like it looks so cool. Like it looks like a bloated like water-filled Ted Danzig. Like it looks amazing. Like everything in that movie looks great. Like a bunch of the sets were like made like in like a building. Like they didn't shoot in like an apartment for Upton Pratt. They didn't shoot into like an apartment for something that tied you over. Like they made these sets and they all look so good, and they made the stair where the crate was, like everything looks real and lived in, and it just everything in that movie looks awesome, and it just feels real, and it's such a fun movie. So I know I've spoiled everything in the movie, but if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It's a great watch.
We get it already. Let's go watch the movie.
It's so much fun. It's such a great movie. All the George A. Romero directing, Stephen King writing, Tom Savini's effects. Like, there's what's not to love about this movie, especially if you love horror movies. Like all these names, like that made this movie. Like how could you not see Creepshow? And that's gonna do it for me. We'll come back soon and see what our next movie is. I don't think it's gonna be too hard to figure it out. That we're gonna do the sequel to Creepshow, and I have a special edition of Creepshow 2, so I'll do a little bit more diving into like the documentaries and stuff like this. This doesn't have any special features. It has the trailer, and that's it. So Creepshow 2 is like a collector's edition. There's a lot more to it. And so next time on You Gotta Be Effing Kidding, we're going to do Creepshow 2. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.